Welcome back to the train room, everyone. Today I've got a very special video. I'll be unboxing a locomotive on camera. And what I hope for is that the locomotive inside the box is a late run Rivarossi Berkshire painted up in the Centennial American Railroad scheme. The reason I got this locomotive was because I was handed down a very old version of that particular model. I think it was still with the AHM boxing. And it was an older model, of course, back from, I think, from the early 70s. I received it in 2003, and I put it on the tracks, and it was dead. The only thing that it did do was have the headlight turn on, and that was it. Outside of that, that locomotive was pretty much just paperweight. Well, that's even saying a lot for a locomotive that was very light like that. So, 17 years later, I finally have another one. This time I got the late version, so this one has the RP25 flanges, back head detail. Maybe there's some other different mechanics, but those two are a nice little upgrade to that. And I hope that this locomotive will be running, operational, everything, no issues or anything. Now this one did have a description that said new in box, never really taken out, so I hope that is the case. So with that said, let's take a look at this thing. So yeah, I obviously have not taken this out of the box yet. I like the idea that they put extra taping around the entire box, give it some extra protection, so pretty happy with that. So without further ado, let's check this thing out. Now this locomotive was actually not necessarily on a bid or anything. It was pretty much a buy it now or make best offer. So far the packaging looks pretty good. It's got the nice foam popcorn in it, styrofoam popcorn, however you call it. Oh man. Alright, we got a lot of that here. I'll tell you what, I'm going to clean all this up and then I'll get back to shooting this again. So give me just a moment, please. Alright, I'm back. All the popcorn is all now put away. So now we've got to focus on the locomotive itself with the box. So on top of the popcorn, it also has a nice bubble wrap around it, so it's well protected. Pretty happy about that. You know, because you gotta have importance with how a locomotive is packed. These Rivarossi boxes are not the most protective. It does have styrofoam casing to it, but when it comes to the box itself, it's, you know, thin cardboard. So I really appreciate that this thing was pretty well protected. You know, shipping can be pretty rough, and it can be the difference of you receiving a locomotive the way you want it to versus not having it in the desirable condition. So I'm pretty happy about that. Now let's take a look at the results. See what we got here. In my other Rivarossi locomotives, I've never had a printed thing like this before. Kind of cool. I'm not a huge fan. I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this. I'm not the biggest Berkshire fan, even though there's another one right there in the Erie scheme. But this one is pretty sentimental to me, just because it's the American Railroads one. I do like the Chesapeake and Ohio Canals. I think they're really good looking locomotives. I don't think the nickel plate Berks are bad by any reason, but I just never got into them. But this one is, I like this particular paint scheme because it's more than just a drab black locomotive. It's got a little more color to it. Alright, so there's our locomotive. I forgot to mention the other thing that the old one was a problem with is that the pilot was missing, number boards were missing, and it was pretty much really dogged out. This looks a lot better than that. So I think that this looks pretty good from the side. Let's hopefully that the entire locomotive holds up to that. So a first overall impression for the tender. The paint looks pretty good. Seems like all the parts are there. Looking at the wheels, doesn't really seem to have any wear on it. Yeah, they look pretty good. A little bit of that styrofoam on it. Ah, okay, so there's one issue here. So this little piece should go in that little hole right there. Other than that, it's not too bad. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. It's not perfect as we see here, but I can take care of that in a moment. And most importantly, the locomotive itself. I guess the best way to take it out. I could be wrong, but the version that I had may have had striping along here, along the walkway. Could be wrong though. First overall impression of the locomotive itself. Looks like it. Yeah, it's always the annoying styrofoam on it. So the front looks like everything is there. The valve gear looks pretty good. The wheels look pretty good. Just gotta take that out. Handrails look like they're in place. Nothing seems to be broken or missing. That's always important. Okay, so this might give me a hint that this actually is a new in-box model. Look at the more annoying piece out of that. That is annoying right there. The way I can tell is because in the rear of the cab you would actually have these handrails on each side. That is included here, it's not missing, so these were never applied. So I might get the fact that this legitimately is a new in-box locomotive. This never has ran before. And considering this locomotive is from 1997, that's a long way. Pretty impressive. I don't know who previously owned this locomotive, but whoever did didn't even want to take it out of the box. Yeah, I would say that this looks really good. And evidently there's definitely no dust on it, which will give you a sign that this was out at some point. Unless I've got another joint here that needs to connect on the handrail, but I don't. Oh, I see where it is. Okay, so that piece right there. There's a loose one right here, and the hole that it's supposed to go into, it might be broken. Yeah, it's not. I'm also looking here, the very front one, and it's not quite in. So this is about on par with about, say, 95%. I'm not really going to complain too much about that. But overall, I think this looks really good. It's very impressive for a model this old to have never been run before. It's not like a really special model by any means, but it holds a candle to its own. Since this locomotive came out, we've had Proto 2000, Bachmann, MTH, all produced 284s. I believe MTH was the only one to recreate this particular paint scheme. But I would strongly prefer the Rivarossi one if I could find one, which I did. And for the most part, it looks pretty good to me. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with the way it is, especially with the deal I got on this thing. So let me go ahead and put this assembled and on the track. Alright, here I am again, and I apologize if we're on the backlit side here, but I do like the fact that the rods are down on this side. And getting a final look at it, it does look really well. I took care of all those little handrail issues, and it looks perfect otherwise. There is nothing wrong with this. It looks great. Everything's there. Nothing missing, nothing broken. So just popping in a little bit of handrail pieces, and what I have here is what is likely a brand new 1997 model. So now it's time to see how this thing runs. The goal here is just to see if it moves. And yes, it's straight up out of the box. I have not lubricated this yet. I don't know what this sounds like, what this runs like, or anything. But I at least want a locomotive that can move more than just having the headlight turn on. So now, let's see how it rolls. There is a lot of play. The locomotive from side to side. Okay, a little bit rough, but you know what? That's pretty good for a locomotive that has probably not moved since it left the factory. And I'm glad nothing really seized up or anything. There's not really any weird noises. I think that, running in time, being lubricated, this thing is going to be pretty smooth. I have a couple of other Rivarossi locomotives from the same time period, and they run really well. I think this one can definitely hold a candle to its own. So now let me give its final thoughts. Okay, so my first impression of this locomotive overall, I'm happy with it. It looks really good, doesn't seem to have any broken or missing pieces. It runs relatively well for a locomotive that has never ran since it left the factory. And I'm really stating that, I really believe that. And I also got this for a really good price. So this locomotive was on eBay for I think a few months, and it was on there for a buy it now or best offer kind of thing. It wasn't on an auction. And I believe that it was because of the listing, the title of that was the reason that it probably didn't catch any attention. It was at a set price, no one made an offer. The price went down a little bit, still nothing. And the price went down again, a little bit bigger this time, and still nothing. And at that point, I figured, you know what, even at that point that it's already set now, I'm going to put my own offer in there, which was even lower. I figured, you know, what's the worst that could happen? They reject it, they do a counter offer. So I went for it, and I immediately got accepted to purchase the locomotive. So I got this locomotive for a very good deal. So I'm very happy with it. I got the locomotive that I was looking for all these years, new in box from 1997 for a very good price. And it's because of the listing. You see, when you're looking for one of these on eBay, you probably, look up Rivarossi 284, HO Berkshire, whatever. But this was listed as Rivarossi HO 248 Berkshire American RR. So I think just because the 248, that might have reached out to less people, and I use that to my advantage. So if you are looking for a locomotive out there, and it is kind of hard to find, don't be surprised that it might still be out there, even if you are putting in certain keywords, because there's always typos, and that can make a big difference of getting a really nice locomotive for a very good price. And I'm really happy that I was able to get it like that. It's also important to look at the seller when they're listing a product that you're interested in. Because I looked at the listing, and when I saw 248, I was like, okay, well, that's a typo, and maybe somebody who's selling it doesn't know much about model trains or locomotives in general. But it's very important to look at the profile and see recent feedback, see how many ratings they have, because you don't want to buy a nice locomotive with a really good price from a seller that has less than 10 total feedbacks or has a negative review in there. So it's very important to sort of look around before you make the initial commitment, because sometimes you end up with something that is in less dire shape or potentially might not even show up at all. And that's a very big disappointment. You won't have spent money on something and you were excited to get it, only to find out that it was a huge disappointment. But that's not the case with this thing. So this was probably one of the best deals I found on eBay. Yeah, it is the place for many of us modelers looking for an older locomotive. eBay is pretty much the place for that. Now, I'm not sure what the story is behind this particular locomotive, but I think it's just a lucky find. Now, Rivarossi is interesting because this locomotive is from 1997, but cosmetically and detail-wise, I think it's pretty much remained unchanged since Rivarossi first came out with the Berkshire in the mid-1960s. That's a long time ago. And it's over 50 years ago now, but it was already old and dated in 1997, which was the final release year for the Berkshires. Now, Rivarossi has done that to many of their locomotives. They had, the Big Boy, the Cat Ford, some of their Hudsons and Pacifics from the 60s and 70s, And when they were finally made their last releases under Rivarossi in the late 90s, early 2000s, they pretty much remained unchanged cosmetically, but the mechanics were different. So at least this is a bit more modernized. So it's kind of an interesting appearance to see how Rivarossi has really, how far they've come, because they were pretty much the only game in town if you wanted a Berkshire or a larger articulated locomotive in the 90s. But nowadays we have a lot more, and some are some really impressive models out there, even in the non-conventional market. For those who have gone through the old listings of model radar magazines from the 90s, Rivarossi locomotives were fairly expensive. Not just the Berkshires, but all their models. I think that's to do with the part in fact that they were made in Italy. They're pretty good build quality, they run really well. I think they were some of the best locomotives that, you know, steam enthusiasts could get in the 1990s. Of course, that's pretty much changed now, since there's a lot of other brands out there putting out some really good stuff, and Rivarossi has pretty much disappeared from the American market. I think that the 4014 in that golden spike scheme was the last they've released, but that's all we know of. I don't know if they're going to come back and even release this again, but at least we have the late 90s version to appreciate. And it's funny because this is the late 90s version, but the American Railroad scheme first came out in 1972, and cosmetically it looks exactly the same. It's funny, but that just goes to show you like how long that they can keep a locomotive in a production run. Again, I think the only cosmetic difference might be that the walkway might have been painted, but I could be wrong about that. But again, I'm really happy with this locomotive. Very, very happy with it. The seller is going to get some very good feedback, and I'd say it's safe to say that the price I paid for this is about on par with a used model from the 70s. A brand new one from the last release would fetch a pretty high price. So I'm really happy I got a good deal on this. Rivarossi models from the 90s have definitely risen up in price. These are definitely coming more collector's items. So if you're able to find one for a good deal, don't let it go, because you never know if it's going to show up again, let alone for a good price. So thank you very much for watching, and hey, leave a comment if you had a good deal on a locomotive. I'd like to hear about it. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.